Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And you're alive, so...
Yeah, this show almost didn't happen today. I got super sick on Tuesday, which was my day off, so that's always cool. Mm-hmm. It was that kind of thing, like you kind of I felt a little shitty on Monday. But it was like, by the time I got off work, I was like, oh, okay, I'm fine. It was just a bad day at work. And then, like, the next day, it's like, nope, this is the worst sore throat I've ever had.
It's weird how often that happens, but I think it's because, like, in the course of your normal adult day when you have to work, you, like, fight through it. You just try to ignore it and pretend like you're not sick. And then you finally get some time off and you have nothing to do but just relax, and your body's like, okay, fucker.
All right,
like,
yeah, we're shutting down.
Right.
Pull the switch. No, but like I did pretty good. I think I went over a year without actually really getting sick. And then this happened, and you just start going through mentally as I was basically fucking bedridden yesterday. But you just start going through your mind of like all these horrible decisions you made that could have led to this. And like you're thinking about every time you drunkenly might have ate food off the floor. And it's like, and I don't think I did that, but I might have, and then you just like all the shit you touched and like, what can I do to prevent this going forward? And it's basically eradicate the flu is about the only thing I can gather.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where my mind first goes to like, who's the last person I heard cough? I'm going to go kill them.
Right.
But it's generally not, that's usually not the person that got you sick, because usually those people are like past the contagious point anyway. It's some like sneaky motherfucker that like...
Right. Like, and my whole department at work basically has gotten sick in some way, shape, or form, and I'm just glad I got through it without getting sick during like the busiest part of the year. But yeah, like, so it was just this really bad sore throat, and I thought we weren't, like yesterday I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to actually talk tomorrow. And now it's just sort of moved on to like a generic pain in the ass cold. So you're just gonna like hear me sniff a bunch during this show, because why edit that out, right? That's what people want to hear.
It brings authenticity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what's worse, having like the worst sore throat of your life or it getting better just in time for the show. It's like, fuck.
Yeah. Well, I like doing the show. Yeah. Like, I just wish, like you get really sick like that, and you have those, like, for me, it's usually like that, where you have two really hard, like, this sucks, I feel terrible. And then, like, after that, you just have this annoying period for, like, 2 weeks of just sniffing anymore. And coughing.
I don't get sick too often anymore, but when I do, yeah. Like, day 2 is usually the day where I'm seriously thinking, like, I might die. I'm still not going to the hospital, because fuck that.
Yeah. Like, if anyone can cure me here, it will be me. Right. My spirit.
But you're, like, to that point where you're honestly kind of starting to think, like, I wonder if this is a horrible issue. Right. And then it gets better, but that cough, like, once it gets down into my, like, lungs, I have it for, like, a month and a half, 2 months. It's ridiculous. Like, you feel completely fine, but it's if you take too deep a breath, you're coughing. So
yeah, and it's not good after playing a game like Red Dead Redemption 2, where you feel like a fucking character in that goddamn game, and you're just like, oh shit, TB, you got me. But yeah, this is the how to cure a cold podcast. No. This is the Non-Essential Podcast. Every week, me and Steve get together and tell each other stories that we find interesting. Mm-hmm. They can be about anything. And
it's like the most broad, basic premise, but also like one of the most fun things that I've done in a long time. So,
yeah. And you you are fathering a child. So that is saying something. Today... gonna go back to my well, because I have 2 days to work on this show and get ready for it every week, and those were the days I was sick. So
fever dream time. All right.
You're right. Yeah. These are the things I saw as I was dying. No. kind of went back to the well of, some Southern creepy shit, because I just have plenty of that. So this is the story of Madame LaLaurie, who is she's gotten a bit popular in recent media and pop culture, but this is the true story about her. So Marie Delphine McCarty was born in 1780 in New Orleans, the daughter of an affluent white Creole family, and I'm going to just throw those words out casually like I actually know what they mean when put together in a sentence. Her family had moved from Ireland to the then Spanish-owned Louisiana a generation before her. The family was very well off and well respected in the community. Over her life, she married 3 times and had 5 children total, who she was said to have loved dearly. Some stories will come out later to counter that. Her first husband was a high-ranking Spanish officer, and the pair had a daughter together before he died in Havana on his way to Madrid. 4 years after his death, Delphine remarried a French banker who was about as affluent in their community as Delphine's family had been. With him, Delphine had 3 more daughters and 1 son. When Jean Blanc, who was the banker, died, and I just said that because I wanted to say his name.
Jean Blanc.
She would go on to remarry her 3rd and final husband, a young doctor named Leonard Louis Nicholas LaLaurie. So while those first 2 marriages seemed in some way romantic in nature, or at the very least focused on building a family, it might have been social driven, but there was that goal of like having children. This 3rd marriage seems by all accounts to be very status driven. Leonard was not at all really present in her day-to-day life, and Delphine preferred to manage her own affairs as far as personal life and businesses. It just looked better back then to say you were married, but you didn't actually have to have any sort of relationship beyond the fact that you technically lived together, which I guess people still kind of do today.
Yes, I mean, it's weird how some people like marriage isn't about anything except for like that's what society expects, so we're gonna do it.
Right. And we've come so far since 1831. So in 1831, Madame LaLaurie purchased a 3-story mansion in the French Quarter, where she basically lived with her slaves and daughters. And Leonard he lived there, but he was kind of in and out doing his own thing. Most high society Louisiana people owned slaves back then, but the city was said to be shocked at how polite LaLaurie was to hers, often showing them kindness in public and manumitting 2 of them in 1819 and 1832. I actually didn't know what that word meant. It meant freeing them. So
like everybody, that tells you something heartwarming at the time. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this lady. She's treating her slaves like people.
I was just going to say, this probably says a bit more about New Orleans than it does about LaLaurie, of their response to this type of thing is like, wow, is she treated 2 like human beings? What a nutter.
I mean, they're still slaves and all, but she's kind of nice to them. Weird.
Yeah. But it didn't take long for people to be like, this has to be like bullshit. Like, this is a front. She's probably a real asshole behind the scenes. And fuck, were they right. Like Louisiana, unlike most southern states back then, did have some laws as far as protecting slaves from, quote, unusually cruel punishment, which you gotta love that logic. Like when you think about slavery, where it's like we're treating people like property, but show some goddamn respect when you hit them.
Well, and I love the phrasing, the like regularly cruel punishment. That's cool. Just not unusually cruel.
Yeah, and there's nothing unusually cruel about owning people. Like, you have to, like, I'm sure there are definitely some people who would say that, like, you got to take into the context of the situation, but I don't buy that. I think there was probably something that spoke to everybody that, like, this was inherently wrong. They just didn't care because it was part of their fucking economic way of life.
Right.
So Louisiana was an exception of those southern states with these sorts of laws, but Madame LaLaurie gave zero fucks about such laws, and behind her status and social posturing, her mansion was a fucking torture dungeon.
Cool.
Some believed she was keeping secret slaves for her doctor husband to practice Haitian voodoo medicine on, and other reports suggested that if her daughters, who, again, she supposedly loved them so dearly, tried to help the slaves in any way, she would punish and whip them.
The daughters or the slaves, or both?
Well, she would definitely whip the slaves, but she would whip the daughters too if she tried to help them. Like any sort of monster of a person that we've talked about on this show, like the fact in fiction of LaLaurie's cruelty only gets harder to determine as time goes on.
Right.
But there are 3 reports with enough eyewitness accounts that we can comfortably say these incidences happened to at least some extent. One was that one of her slaves, terrified of facing some sort of punishment from LaLaurie, threw himself out the 3rd-story window. Like, he would rather die than, like, have to face whatever the fuck she had cooked up for him. When he did that 3rd-story window was cemented shut, and it's actually kind of interesting and pretty eerie, but to this day, the mansion's still there in New Orleans, and that window is still cemented shut. Like, we cite our sources every week, and you can, on one of mine, there is a photo with the article, and you can just see it because, like, all this mansion is just wrapped in windows, and it's really noticeable to see just this one that's bricked up.
Which is really weird because it's like, if you're trying to stop that from happening again, you'd have to cement every window up. So,
right.
Like, that's just a weird response to, like, fuck it, cement that up.
Yeah, I think it was just like, put in a window, that's a lot of work.
That slave that jumped out the window was my window slave. What do I do
He
now?
was the only one who could make windows. Fuck. No wonder he knew where to go. So witnesses also report that one time a 12-year-old slave named Leah was brushing LaLaurie's hair too hard. LaLaurie flew into a rage and began whipping the girl. Leah climbed out on the roof, and some say she jumped, and others say LaLaurie shoved her off, but all we know is that Leah fell to her death.
Well, 12 years as a slave, that's a pretty long and fruitful.
Right. It's like, it's really funny that this story started off with like, oh, she's the good slave owner.
Yeah, can you believe how nice she treats her slave? She's only killed 2 so far.
Yeah, if there's a moral here, there are no good slave owners.
Weird.
And some are really, really bad.
Shocking twist.
So witnesses saw LaLaurie trying to bury the corpse, and the police were forced to bring down the full weight of 1800s Louisiana justice upon her.
50-cent fine, motherfucker.
He basically nailed it. It was a $300 fine, and she had to sell 9 of her slaves, which she would have family purchase back for her while the law turned a blind eye. So that's what you get for murdering
as
people.
Long as the titles change hands.
It's like, the cops like coming to like a really violent crime and being like, now we don't want to have to come back here again. Like, let this be a warning to you.
Yes.
So the final incident that involved the LaLaurie mansion involved a 70-year-old cook who got chained to the stove with the idea to starve her for a while. In desperation, she started a fire in the hopes that the flames would consume her and the whole house. The fire spread quickly, but not fast enough. While LaLaurie struggled to save her furniture while the police and fire brigades tended to the old woman chained to the stove, once the fire was under control, the cook confessed to her arson and explained how she would rather die than be taken upstairs to the upper floors of the mansion where supposedly those taken would never return. When authorities tried to evacuate the whole mansion because of a bunch of fucking fire damage everywhere, they found that the slave quarters were locked and Delphine and her husband refused to hand over the key. Following the Leah incident, LaLaurie's neighbors had enough of her shit. again, this is that weird slavery like we have standards for our national horror. Like, we're not animals here.
Well, right. And sickeningly, that standard's usually like, as long as any of the terrible stuff that you do is behind closed doors, we're cool. But as soon as you're drawing attention to how bad slaves are, like, right, not slaves, but slave ownership, like, we can't have that. We can't have.
Yeah. It was very much like, this keeps getting out of your house. Get it under control, goddammit.
Right.
But the neighbors were actually, you know, like, it's a weird, like, I don't want to say humanity, because again, bunch of fucking slave owners. But it was a weird, like, crisis of conscience where they, like, after this fire, they almost immediately mobbed up and stormed her mansion and just tore it the fuck apart. By the time they were done, they say little remained but the walls. But they did find the slave quarters and broke into it, and what they found was very fucking gruesome. Slaves starved to the point that their bones were, like, poking through. A woman whose bones were supposedly broken and reset to make her resemble a crab. A man who was wrapped in his own intestines. And then just, like, all these slaves just chained to the walls, and there was this step ladder in the room so that LaLaurie could climb up it and, like, make sure that she hit all these slaves in whatever angle she felt she needed to, while they were chained in these just random, painful positions. Again, it's the kind of story that where, like, who can say how true these reports are? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, it could have been a handful of victims. It could have been up to 100. With enough centuries away from it, extreme torture stories like this kind of seem implausible to us because we're thinking about it in our terms. Like, why the fuck would you do this? But it's not impossible, and it's worth noting that most takes on LaLaurie from people who looked into her life way further than I did for the show seem to actually think that the story was probably far worse, and that these reports are just sort of what we can feel reasonably confident about.
Cool. Like, it's I'll sleep well knowing that, like, we're confident that somebody's intestines were wrapped around them, but it was probably worse.
Right. That was just one guy, you know, and it's also that thing about slavery where it's like, you know, we say, like, my God, she did this to people. They didn't look at them as people. So, you know, who knows what actually got reported and what was true and all that. You know, so it's totally believable to me that there would be a much more horrific thing going on, but they were just kind of like, these are the fucking bullet points. And yeah, she was bad.
I like the idea, because we've had it in other stories too. Notably I can't think of her name off the one I talked about a couple weeks ago, with a girl that got, like, super into her weird ass Protestant, like, Christianity. Right. But where the, like, law enforcement shows up and they're like, okay, we're here for a second. A little girl died and now this woman tried to burn herself to death. We need to go through the home. And they're like, no. And the cops are like, well, we tried. Yeah. Back to the station, boys.
Well, I guess we'll have to go regroup. We'll be back next week. No, yeah. So LaLaurie knew following the fire that people had kind of had enough of her shit. I don't know if she got tipped off or just sometimes you can feel it in the air when your neighbors don't particularly like you. And she escaped the mob before they could get a hold of her. She found passage to Alabama before leaving for Paris. Despite hiding out there under a new name, someone did identify her and just told her to leave, I guess. But she supposedly just jumped to a new French province where she supposedly died in December of 1849. Her remains were quietly returned to New Orleans and buried.
I like that, like, phrase, because I get what they mean, but it's like, as opposed to, like, loudly returned, like everybody trumpets and but I like I said, I know what you mean, but
I have to imagine there would be some people there like, she's coming back, fuck that, you know.
Oh sure, yeah, they're
you know, like, but yeah, I guess she got a quiet burial. As I said, her mansion has been rebuilt and renovated over the years, you know, so obviously we're 2019 now, so it's probably, it's like, who knows, there's probably like one brick that's from the same building at this point. But, you know, it is pretty accurate. And like I said, they did keep the cemented window. And its disgusting history has sort of solidified it, or solidified its reputation, rather, as one of the most haunted locations in the South.
Which is saying a lot, because apparently in the South, every location is haunted.
Right. Every location is the most haunted, according to these articles. But yeah, people say, obviously, you hear people screaming. Some people say, like, there's like a spirit of a slave that will like try to attack you before vanishing. You know, it's probably like, it definitely one of those places where it's like you can probably just pick up on like how fucking nightmarish it is. Just, you know, like it's weird, like, cause like you and me are not very like superstitious about like ghosts and stuff, and well, I've talked about these stories a lot, and a lot of the times we're just sort of making fun of it, and like, you know, I don't believe that the place is actually haunted, but there are times where it's like you go to a place and you can probably like you just feel like shit went down here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you're 100% right, but I point this out every time. It's like I firmly don't believe in ghosts. I also would say that I 100% would be fucking terrified to spend the night in this place by myself, like in the dark. But yeah, I completely agree. There's just, even people's houses, there's certain like houses you'll go in and you just get this like bad vibe, and then other houses not so much.
Yeah, totally. Like I remember like staying at my grandparents' house one time when I was really little, and you just felt like something was wrong there a little bit, and I thought it was just, I'm just uncomfortable. I'm in like a new house, and then like my grandma tells me a story about how a relative of mine got fucking murdered. I'm just like, one, why are you telling me this when I'm like 8? Two, you know, this doesn't help me sleep. I got to be here for another week. But I totally you get that vibe from places where it's like, man, something is not right here. And it's always interesting when you get that feeling before you know the story behind it.
Right.
Which I mean, is like I said, I don't really buy into the whole ghost thing, but you do, like, sometimes there is just that like instinct, and it's not always true, and you only remember when it's like correct. But there are certainly times where it seems like spot on. Like, I knew that place was fucked up.
Yeah, I guess the best way for me to put it is like, I don't think ghosts are real, but also I'm wrong about a lot of stuff. So,
but I don't know. Fuck.
Yeah, and then that would certainly, like, that's what I was going to say. It would be curious to like get to go to a place like that before hearing this story and just see what your like general vibe. Now, I mean, a lot of these, I've only been on like one or two like plantation tours and they were always when we were little, like going on vacation and driving like through the South. And when you're little and your parents are like, hey, let's go see this plantation, it's like the least interesting thing in the world.
Yeah.
Now I would find it interesting. There'd be something there that I'd at least find interesting. But all of those places kind of have this weird vibe just because they're old. Like,
right.
And
like I said, like, even if you're not fucking Madame LaLaurie, you, like, these were places that, like, would take part in, like, a national fucking tragedy to, like, generations of people, you know, and, so, like, yeah, you could definitely pick up a vibe from that. So, yeah, that's all I got. I kind of wanted to keep it short because, you know, I'm dying.
Yeah. Madame LaLaurie, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say, how's that spelled? That's the least interesting thing to ask on a podcast. But...
It's L-A, then capital L-A-U-R-I-E. I know I think she was a character in like that American Horror Story show or something, and that's where kind of the resurgence of the name sort of popped up in recent years, which made me a little hesitant to talk about it, but fuck it, I talked about goddamn Commodus and Russell Crowe killed him, so.
Yeah. So, well, this week I kind of did one of my sheets in that I don't have like a singular like story. I have a topic that I've got like a handful of different. Basically, I looked up like interesting crimes or weird crimes, and they're all like
cool
modern
crimes.
Yeah, and even that's kind of the wrong term for it. You'll see as I go through them. But they were just like, I was looking through just like, okay, what's a weird crime story? And these are all like newspaper clippings. And so some of them are more like outright crimey than others, but they were all kind of interesting to me. Although the first one's kind of gets to, it goes hand in hand with your topic. So I'll just jump right into it. In December of 2015, Spanish police arrived at a residence in Dos Hermanas near the city of Seville and discovered a naked 59-year-old man who was being held captive in they called it a dovecote. It's like in Europe, a lot of these houses have them. Think like a pigeon cage, but like one of those kind of bigger ones, like where they'd have like an aviary or whatever. But I mean, it's not big. Yeah. It's 3 meters by 3 meters. So about 9 feet by 9 feet. But it's a fucking like birdhouse.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, a cage basically, but like not a dog cage, a little bit bigger. So anyway, so like I said, approximately 3 meters by 3 meter. The cage was in deplorable condition, shockingly, and was furnished simply with a filthy mattress and a bucket to use as a toilet, since the area had no running water. So
I love that. Like this cage, you can't keep a man in a cage like this. It's got to be a better cage.
Better cage with more furnishings. At least
change the bucket once in a while. God.
So the article didn't say what initially caused the police to like go to the house, but it was the home where the captive man's 61-year-old sister and 76-year-old brother lived. So it was a family home, and it was his sister and brother that had him locked up in this cage.
And he was how old? 50?
59, yeah. So his parents really spread it. Well, I guess he was pretty close to the sister's age, but yeah.
But that's when it's got to, like the age thing's got to flip, because you go like your early life and your older siblings fuck you up. But once you hit that age and they go the other way, it's like you're the top dog now, man. You don't let them put you in a cage.
That's probably why in a cage. That's why they did it. They were afraid. They're like, shit, he's overtaking us.
He's getting stronger.
What makes the case even more remarkable, though, is that upon investigating, it was determined that the man had been locked in the cage for the last 20 years. So that's where the age really comes in.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, so as it turns out, the brother suffered from mental illness, and apparently his siblings at some point thought the best course of action was to lock him up in a cell with nothing and keep him there forever, I guess. So it's a really short story. And of course, they got the guy out of the cage, and it said that he was getting hospital treatment. This is an older article. And then
that's one idea.
Brother and sister were arrested on suspicion of unlawful detention. So, I mean, and they literally said like this, like I said, when I picture something like this, like these little pigeon houses, like you see on TV, like New Yorkers having on the roof. And it was a little bigger than that, and it was like built into the house, but it was behind, like you had to go through two like old heavy locked doors that like one of them, they even had barred with like a big, piece of lumber and chains and a lock. So yeah.
It's so much work when you could just like communicate with him.
Or just like call up the government with him and be like, hey, look, he has needs and we can't meet him. Can you do something about it? It's like, nah, let's just lock him in this birdhouse back here.
That's so much work.
That's the ticket.
So much work, and it's destroying him. It's destroying your home.
Well, I mean, would you really? I mean, they said he had a bucket for a toilet, but 20 years, they were obviously like at some point emptying the bucket. Like,
yeah,
that's gross.
And it's been 20 years. In 20 years, I guarantee you could have worked with him and had him like handling his own bathroom shit.
So I did make a note here, though, that I do have some doubts about this story. One, that it'd be incredible enough for anybody to survive for 20 years in those kind of conditions, let alone go unnoticed. But it's possible. It's happened. I mean,
there definitely
it's happened before. But the article is from the Daily Mail, which is not the UK's like most reputable publication.
Yeah, like they're the type of people who'd be like, they would say the story and be like, see what the libs want to do to you?
Right. And though in the story itself, it mentioned that it was sourced, like, oh, this is from a French newspaper, I didn't find any other links at all to, like, an English version of the story. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist in a French paper, because if I'm Googling for it and it's in French, I'm not going to find it. But right. I didn't find any supporting, like, most of these, not most of these, all of these that I'm going to talk about, I kind of like did some searching and like to verify things, and this was the one that I really couldn't find anything else. And it also always like sets off a flag in my mind when the article completely fails to list any names whatsoever.
Right.
Now, sometimes that's due to privacy stuff. It's like they don't want to, but again,
I also just like a huge red flag is the idea of the Daily Mail reading anything in French.
Right.
Seems really improbable.
So this first one was kind of questionable. I will say the rest of them are 100% definitely true. But I had written this one down.
Because I was there, damn it.
Yes, I did it, sucker. I mean, I plead the fifth.
These are Steve's cool crimes.
So the next one comes from February of 2016. 24-year-old Joshua James. You're always, it's going to be good when there's alliteration in the name like that, and they're like both first names. But Joshua James was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon without intent to kill, which is a weird crime to me because it's like, oh, I shot you, but I wasn't trying to kill you. I shot you in the foot. And that's kind of what they mean. It'd be like me going after you with a baseball bat. It's a deadly weapon, but I wasn't necessarily trying to murder you.
I just imagine a dude like holding a gun sideways, so like not even by the handle, but just like the handle and the barrel, and then charging, like just going Yeah, so assault with a deadly weapon without intent to kill came from a rather serious charge arising out of an incident with a Wendy's drive-thru worker that occurred 4 months prior to his arrest. Apparently, on the night of October 11th, Joshua went through a Wendy's drive-thru and presumably placed an order. When the man at the window handed him his drink, Joshua threw a 3.5-foot-long alligator at him and sped away. So, in an interview with police, Joshua admitted to the assault. And basically all he said was that he had been driving around that night and he came across a 3.5-foot alligator on the side of the road, and he did what anybody would do, of course. He picked it up for Wendy's with it.
He put it in his fucking truck. He never explained his motive for like actually throwing it at the Wendy's employee. My guess is he was high or drunk or whatever, but it never says anything about like suspected substance use.
He probably put it in and he's like, man, I'm gonna have a goddamn gator friend. And then he's like, hey, let's go get some food. And then he realized this thing's gonna fucking eat me.
That's pretty much what I wrote. I said that he didn't give a motive, but I imagine it had something to do with the realization that he had a freaking 3.5-foot tooth monster in the cab of his truck, and he just didn't want it anymore.
But all the ways, like, God, that poor Wendy's employee.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shitty job anyway, and I'm not like saying that like, oh, if you have it, you say.
No, it's a very it's a tough, thankless job,
right?
And you already have enough to fucking deal with from customers, let alone like the fear that some fucking maniac will hurl an alligator at you.
And it's a good sight. It's not like, sometimes it's like, oh, it's like 2-foot long baby alligator, 3.5 feet. It's not a full grown, 10-foot gator by any means, but it's big enough to like, I don't want to coming at my face. Like, and all he did was hand him his fucking drink.
Right. Fucking, that sucks.
I just ordered a Coke. I figure a gator will cover it, right? The good news is that nobody got hurt, even the gator. A Florida Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Officer, which is the most awkward name for that department. But they were able to get the gator back into the wild and actually like release it. A lot of times you hear these stories, they're like, well, the gator smelled Wendy's food now. It's acclimated. We got to kill it.
I was just about to say the gator did die later on because it would only eat Frosties.
Right. And it wasn't that he couldn't get them. It was the cholesterol killed him. But yeah. But aside from assault with a deadly weapon, Joshua was charged with illegal possession of an alligator, which is, of course, a law because it's Florida. Like, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with that.
We have to legislate
possession
like
of
this.
Alligators, right?
Every podcast and every radio show has shit on Florida, and it's like,
yeah, and I know this one. If you use social media at all, there's always the like Florida Man accounts, and I know this one's been on that. Yeah. And like I said, this was 100% true. You can look it up. There's pictures and video of the gator itself, but fuck, man, like, working at the window, it was like 1:26 a.m. I think they said. So you got the shit third shift anyway. And then it's like, here's an alligator in your face, fucker.
How Mac would it be, though, if the dude caught it and whipped it right back at the dude's face?
Or just, like, caught it and, like, gazed into its eyes and hypnotized it like some fucking Crocodile Dundee thing. And it's like, now I've got a minion.
Like, that's the thing. If that shit happens, like, is your shift over? Like, you get to... I would fucking be done at my job. If somebody threw an alligator at me, I'd be like... I'm at least taking 3 days off.
You know, the first shift manager came in and was like, what happened? You're like, yeah, some dude threw a gator at me. Don't worry, they got it out of here. And the manager's like, you need to clean this whole fucking kitchen. It's contaminated.
Fucking gator pissed on the floor.
I don't care if your shift's over. You're staying here till every inch of this kitchen's cleaned. That's probably what happened.
And then I would get an alligator and throw it at that manager.
You call up Florida Wildlife and you're like, hey, can I borrow that gator again real quick?
Yeah. You haven't put him back, have you?
So my next one, and this one's, it's a crime, but it's not what you traditionally consider a crime. And you're gonna, if you're like me, you're gonna end up rooting for the quote unquote criminal. But it takes us back to Spain. There was a man named Joaquin Garcia. And he collected about $41,500 a year in salary from his government job as a building supervisor at a water treatment plant. He'd been employed there since 1990. In 2010, he won an award for 20 years of loyal service. But the problem was when the deputy mayor, Jorge Blas, went to deliver the award, nobody could find him. And that's because Joaquin hadn't come to work that day or the day before or any of the days over the past 6 years.
Oh, dude. Awesome.
So
you fucking flew under the radar that hard.
Yes.
Oh, that's so fucking cool.
So according to his lawyers, he had quit coming to work due to a hostile work environment and harassment from his coworkers. And also, he just said there really wasn't any work for him to do, which I completely fucking agree because they didn't notice he didn't come in for 6 years.
It's the opposite of like that dude from Office Space, fucking Milton or whatever. And he's like,
they forget he's there.
Yeah, like because they're like, oh well, we'll stop paying him and he'll stop showing up. And instead, it's like, well, this guy stopped showing up 20 years ago.
So, for their part, his coworkers just kind of assumed that the building had been being overseen by local authorities, because that's all he was, like the building supervisor. Joaquin denied any wrongdoing, and frankly, I feel like if your job doesn't notice that you're not there for 6 years in a row, I kind of have to agree with him.
Yeah, fuck this. Like, if you're too dumb to fire me, then that's on you. Like,
right. He did, however, retire as soon as all this came out. The courts disagreed that there was nothing wrong with collecting a paycheck from a job that you weren't doing. I put in quotes, damn the man. It's like, fuck him.
Yeah.
And thus, the government decided to fine him to the maximum extent allowable by the law, $30,000, which sucks, unless you're good at math. And then you can figure out that he made $44,500 for 6 years, minus the $30,000 fine. That means he still made $237,000 for not doing anything. And
yeah.
I'd call that a win. Now, it does still suck because that salary is, and I don't know what the economy's like over there and the cost of living or whatever, but it's not like that's a Rolls Royce, salary.
It's not he wasn't a millionaire, but
no, but it's a living wage, so the chances are he spent a good deal of that just to survive. So then when you have to come up with $30,000 to pay your fine, I'm sure that was not like that probably sucked ass. But
yeah, and it was also, completely not his fault. I mean, like,
I know. I mean, because how many people just they like quit by just not showing up to work? And that's probably what he thought he did. He was just like, fuck him, I'm not going in anymore. And then the paycheck kept coming, and he's like, I wonder if I should call. And the next one comes, you're like, I kind of like these paychecks.
Like, I want to say, like, well, you should do the right thing and be like, hey, why am I still getting a paycheck? But fuck companies, man. Like, I don't give a shit about them.
And it wasn't even like a private company. It was the government. And kids, if you're going to learn one lesson from our podcast, it's you should never steal. But if you do, steal from the government, because fuck them.
Or from anywhere. And just steal.
I won't be here next week because the IRS will be the only people to listen to this podcast, and they'll kick my door in like, what did you say about stealing from the government?
Look, I'm not telling kids anything. Don't be crazy. I'm just saying that, like, society is already... If you quit your job and they keep paying you, that's cool. I'm just saying society is crumbling. Burn it to the ground, like, don't... I would encourage anyone, if you can somehow just not show up to work and still get paid for it, then you won.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned. That's not a crime. That is... I'm always a fan of somebody who takes a rigged system and somehow gets it to work in their favor.
Well, if anything, it shows how convoluted and stupid governments are. And again, this is Spain, but this story could apply anywhere, especially here in the U.S., where, like, the government's so expensive and we need more money and more taxes, but we have these positions where you can literally not be here for 6 fucking years and nobody notices.
Right. Yeah.
There's a lot of failures in that system there, and it's unfair to take them all out on him. But anyway, so he's kind of a hero of mine.
Yeah, I respect the game, even though it sounds like he didn't do fuck all to make this happen. He rolled with it, and that is, if that's not Buddhism at its truest form, it's just, well, we'll just roll with the punches here and get fucking bank.
Can you imagine, like I said, he quit going in because he said he was being harassed and like bullied so much at work. So you're like, a situation like that, he's probably in like this perpetual depression, not looking forward to getting up every day, to the point that he broke. And he's just like, I cannot go to work anymore. Fuck it. And then the paychecks kept coming, and it's like, he deserved that. He put up with all that until his breaking point. Keep paying the man.
As far as I'm concerned, you've earned every dollar if they keep giving you every dollar.
I'm just happy they have some apparent law that limits the maximum punishment, because they wanted to go back for the full amount.
Yeah, they shouldn't have gotten shit, but, it's not surprising to me that the government got money back for their fuck up. That's you said this could apply here. It does apply here all the time, where, like, every tax season they're trying to, like, figure out how to get fucking money back from you, and it's like, you assholes, like, you should be paying me.
Oh, you're talking to a guy that takes out the maximum amount that you can from your paycheck, and then 3 years in a row they're like, oh, you need to pay us more. It's like, how?
Yeah. I've been pretty fortunate in my adult life in that I've always gotten money back, but you can feel them. You can feel them working against you.
We broke down. That's why we're having a kid, just so that we can get a fucking tax credit.
And we actually named him Tax Credit.
Tax Credit.
T.C. Gibson.
Okay, so the next one is kind of interesting. It's very short. Way back in 1990, when I was still trading MC Hammer dubs for Vanilla Ice dub tapes during recess, literally, that's what we were doing back then, a guy in Washington State was watching the hit show Unsolved Mysteries. The episode detailed a young girl who was abducted from her home, and authorities had no idea who could have done it, which is the entire premise of the show Unsolved Mysteries, if you somehow haven't seen it or not familiar. The viewer recognized the girl and promptly called authorities, who were probably sick of getting these calls every time a fucking episode of Unsolved Mysteries aired, because seriously, it happened a lot. That was one of the complaints that law enforcement had about that show. But they went to follow up on the lead, and sure enough, she was not the girl from Unsolved Mysteries. However, she was a girl that had been kidnapped. So, as it turns out, the 13-year-old Monica had been taken by her estranged father when she was 5. The father had told Monica that her mother had died, and so for 8 years, she never realized that she was, in fact, a kid who had been napped, which I assume is the verb for kidnapped. So, in the 8 years since she'd gone missing, her mother had remarried and had a son. So, overnight, thanks to a TV show that she had absolutely nothing to do with, Monica had her mother back and now a new brother, which she was pretty stoked about, but also, like, the article, like, they interviewed this girl because she's 13, so she's old enough to, like, you know, give an interview. And she was super fucking chill about the whole thing. Like, imagine being a kid and all of a sudden you find out that the dad and I think he had remarried too. So the family that you're like, yeah, it's my normal family and I live with them. And then all of a sudden cops show up. They're like, nope, fucker, he stole you. Your mom's over here. Like a whole, like 2 states away, well, state or so away. She was in California somewhere, I think in the LA area. And he was like, they said, I didn't write it down. It was an island that's, like I said, Washington state, but they said like right on the border of Washington and Canada. But she was like, hey, I was happy before, but now I'm happier. And she was pretty happy to have a brother. And then her only other quote was that she said for Christmas she wanted an MC Hammer tape because it was the 90s. So it was funny because when I started writing this like little blurb, I just put that thing about MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice because that's what I think of when you tell me the exact year 1990, because that's what was popular then. And I think it was like the dumbest thing ever. And it makes you feel like old and stupid. And then the article ends with, I want an MC Hammer tape. It's like, I told you. But
I imagine how fucking, like you say, like, oh, I was pretty happy there before. Like, but how dark could your life be if like that's what you want? Like at the,
it's
at
true.
the end of it all.
I'm finally glad to be back home with my mother and learn that she's still alive. And I just really want an MC Hammer tape. But I do love the idea of like, because you know these people, like I said, it was an actual problem for law enforcement back with Unsolved Mysteries and all those kind of shows where like this girl's gone missing. Start
solving them, huh? Stop making the fucking public have to do your fucking dirty work.
You just know some busybody, like nothing better to do man was watching the show. He's like, that looks like this girl. It's like, yeah,
I think that's where I'm heading. Like I'm probably, you know, another good decade of like no fucking real social interaction of like just being like, hey, I'm solving crimes for you.
I see you becoming like one of those superhero things that like not an actual powers, but like vigilante.
I'll dress up as the crazy crab mascot and like try to fight crime in an alleyway and just get my ass kicked every night.
If you get a outfit like that, you don't have to fight crime. Just like make sure you do that shit where you're like across the street by like a steaming like vent, and then when they look up and notice you, you disappear behind a bus. Like, just keep doing that until you drive.
That would be scary. If you people don't follow me on Twitter, you have no idea what we're talking about.
And that's what I was about to say. If you're not familiar with the Crazy Crab, don't Google it. Just follow Ben on Twitter because it's a much better experience that way. But
yeah, it's pretty much he's my psychologist and lawyer at this point.
Gets you through all your toughest times and also your easiest times.
Yeah, I just imagine me wearing that dumb fucking crab costume though, and then like scaring off a mugger, and then like the person being mugged would beat the shit out of me.
Like you're worse than the mugger. Die, crab. Die.
I would rather give this guy all my money than have to look at this.
Anyway, so I've got one more. This one's the longest and also the best because, you know, we're showmen here at this podcast. We save the best for last. This one is also work related, and it's one of like the craziest "how bad is your job" stories I've ever heard. So in May of 2015, Bill Bailey was fired from his job at the Uncompahgre, I think is how it's pronounced. Weird word. Water Users Association.
If you're not sure how to type it on your resume, getting fired from there doesn't count.
Right. But then to go on, the rest of that title is Water Users Association. Like every human being uses water because you die without it. So But
I'm a 15-year recovering water user.
Yes. But it sounds like it was some like utility company that obviously dealt with water. So he was fired, but his offense was when somebody asked what one had to do to get promoted around here, he responded with a sarcastic, apparently by blowing shit up. Which might seem like a weird response, but also something that generally wouldn't cost you your job. But Bailey's supervisor, Aaron English, overheard the comment and fired him for insubordination. And that might have been that, had Bill Bailey not gone on to seek workers' compensation for an injury sustained on the job. The Water Association was arguing that as an employee who had been fired, filing after the fact for workers' compensation, that they were not obliged to pay his claim, which apparently legally would have been right as long as Bailey was fired fairly. Which is why Bailey's case and his lawyers were what his case and his lawyers were focused on was his firing and whether it was fair. And then that is how the story of his boss, Aaron English, became spectacularly public. Apparently, English had worked at the Water Association for a long time and had developed a reputation as quite the prankster. For instance, on many occasions, English would hide a baggie of his own feces in the lunchboxes of his coworkers. A prank, apparently, that he claimed was okay because he put it in a baggie first, so,
Yeah.
That's fine then.
Oh, man, you made it touch. That's gross.
So during the trial, it would come out that all these things that he would do on the job would come out. Aside from the feces in the lunchbox, he also once tried to take a dump on a fellow employee who was working down in a ditch. So, he literally, popped a squat over the guy and tried to poop on him because
Which
apparently...
is pretty bold, because that's a very vulnerable position to put yourself in. And
it's also awkward. It'd be hard to pull off without, friendly fire. But so he was one of these guys that thought the only thing funnier than poop jokes is actual shit, I guess.
There's only one thing I love more than a good poop joke, and that's poop.
Poop. Hilarious.
Just eating poop.
On more than one occasion, English built a potato gun out of company materials on company time, which so far is okay with me. But then he'd proceed to shoot it at coworkers who were just trying to do their damn jobs. He apparently had it out for Bailey in particular, who he clearly didn't like for, valid reasons or whatever. So he'd sometimes reroute the water lines Bailey had put in and then blame the poor craftsmanship when customers would call up and complain. So basically, Bailey would do his job, and this guy would come in and fuck it up on purpose, and then the people would call in and bitch, and he'd be like, oh yeah, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Which is a prank, apparently. But his favorite prank seemed to be building homemade bombs out of highly flammable acetate or other chemicals, and then putting it in glass milk bottles. He'd then hide these bombs in places where they'd be likely to be set off, like the engine compartments of company trucks, where one such bomb was said to have been so powerful that it buckled the hood when somebody turned the truck on.
What a scamp, huh?
He'd leave these bombs. He'd also leave these bombs in brush that was scheduled to be burned, so that when coworkers would take torches to the brush, the bombs would explode. Gotcha. It was one of these such explosions that left Bill Bailey with severe hearing loss in one ear, which is the disability that he was seeking payment for. For his part, Bailey had logged several complaints over the 9 years that he'd worked with English, and these complaints would have been heard by the general manager, Steve Fletcher, who would also give testimony during the court case, but on behalf of the Water Association. In other words, he was arguing against Bailey's claim to disability. Right. So why hadn't Fletcher fired English for his behavior? Because, as he said during the court case, to an actual judge, that these pranks were just part of workplace culture, of course.
Poop is funny, Your Honor.
Yeah, he's just goofing around, Judge. In fact, over the course of the 9 years and all these complaints, he not only didn't fire English, but he had actually promoted him.
So Bailey was right.
So Fletcher did explain to the judge that he did give Aaron a verbal warning to not make any more bombs after the one that had deafened Bill Bailey. But So it's like, I told him not to do it, Judge, anymore. You know, they were funny up until that point, but, you know, you better knock this out. But according to all testimony, he kept doing it, and Fletcher didn't give a shit because apparently he thought it was hilarious still.
This is just the most fucking lame, like, Jingle Keys sense of humor I've ever heard.
Right. So this is a good point
boom.
to point out that Bailey was also in treatment for severe anxiety. The root of the cause is one of history's biggest mysteries.
There could be a bomb anywhere.
Poop bomb. Like, you know, you have a bad work environment when you go to work and you say, I hope the only thing I deal with today is somebody's poop.
I hope there's just shit in my lunch.
But at least he, like, quit before English had, like, some brilliant idea to combine the two pranks, I guess. In the end, I guess I'm skipping ahead here. So Aaron was so proud of his pranks, and Fletcher was so insistent that it was all okay, that, like, during the course of this court case, while describing his actions, the judge literally stopped English to remind him that the Fifth Amendment, the one about not, like, self-incrimination, he, like, stopped him and said, hey, the Fifth Amendment's a thing and you may want to consider it.
Hey, no fucking hints. All right.
Spoiler alert, dick.
You go in with the fucking defense you have. All right.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the court certainly ruled in Bailey's favor. They decided that the thing he was fired for was basically nonsense, especially in light of all the awful stuff that he put up with at work, like being blown up. So
you know,
I guess
the judge is like, objection.
Yes.
You keep fucking up.
Are you sure you really want to tell the court about all this stuff? Yeah, Judge, it's like, just wait till we get to the part about me killing his wife. It's like, what?
You guys don't have poop bombs?
I'm sure you do the similar stuff here at the courthouse, right? No, nobody does that, fucker. So, but the weird thing is, like, they ruled in Bailey's favor, but there was nothing about any of, like, of English being charged with anything when he was building fucking bombs and planting them, like, on coworkers. And so I don't know if anything ever happened with that. This all goes back to, like, 2016 was the article in the court, case was over where they decided for his disability. Like, I kind of hope English blew himself up by accident at some point. And then
that's
like,
the thing. Like,
funeral, Fletcher's just there laughing about how hilarious it is. Like,
he's really committed, a real Andy Kaufman. That's the thing, though. Like, there will never be charges until he actually kills someone.
Right. And then they'll be like, how did this happen? Though, the most amazing thing to me about it is, this guy is clearly, like, the most we were talking about the guy last week that made all the money and was, like, Rodney Dangerfield from Caddyshack minus any, like, redeeming. He wasn't fighting for good. He was just a boorish idiot that
pain in the ass. Yeah.
Although he still ended up on his side if you're like me at the end of that story too.
Yeah, because the other people were pains in the ass too.
But, like, so this guy is, like, the same type of guy. Like I said, you knew what track he was on when he's like, I pooped in your lunchbox. It's hilarious. And it's like, what? What the fuck? That's the thing.
Like, you gotta, like, it's got to even out in some way. Like, if that's workplace culture, fine. But so is fucking that dude up.
Right.
Then, like,
well, and what
if you're going to just let shit go, then, like, you got to be able to let it go when, like, Bailey puts that dude through a fucking wall.
Right. Which I would have done as soon as I lost half my fucking hearing permanently.
Yeah, like, once I opened up my lunch, and, like, man, dude, working a shitty job, like, sometimes lunch is the only thing you have to look forward to.
Sometimes, most days, that's like...
Yeah. And if you fucked up my food by putting some shit in it, yeah, you like...
But
I know that it's dangerous. I know people can die from just, like, fist fights and stuff, but...
Oh, well...
I do wish there was a little bit more, like, direct comeuppance for people who are, like, just fucking irritating.
Isn't that the shit, though? Like, if this guy, like, when the thing went off and took out his hearing, if he had turned around and, like, pummeled him with a pipe, guess which one of the two would be in jail? It's like...
Right, and it's like, one person's building bombs and, like, fucking making his coworkers actually eat shit.
And I love that his defense. Well, it was in a baggie. It's like, I don't fucking care. Like,
yeah,
you still contaminated my food, and I'm not eating any of it.
Yeah, so it's like, how much? There's got to be a line. We got to decide as a society, when can I hit you?
Well, and that's what's so amazing to me is not just that this guy exists as an actual person that thinks he's got a personality when he's just obnoxious, but to also have the miraculous chance of being mashed up with like the world's worst boss. That's like, that's okay.
Who would actually find that funny? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm exaggerating. I don't know for sure if like he's like, oh, the pranks were hilarious or anything, but for him to at least go like, boys being boys, like
he's got to find him a little bit funny to keep him around, because you got to imagine any other boss in the world would be like, the fuck's he doing?
Well, it was mind blowing to me, and it's as bad, but this is where like American work culture goes. It's like, oh well, you pooped in people's lunchboxes, maybe don't do that. And then as soon as he blew up a truck's like hood and caused physical damage to company property, you think you'd be like, get the fuck out. Like,
that's a boss who just like thought like, man, Jackass is the best. Like,
bum, 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 bum. That's the part that didn't come out in the hearing, is the boss is probably filming it all. Like, I don't know. My guess is the boss was like stealing company. He's embezzling, and he's like, I don't want to do anything to bring attention to the company. I don't want to do. And then the court case came out, and now that went to hell because, as you can imagine, and this is in Colorado, is where this town I can't pronounce is, and like as this court case is going on and these things are coming out, like it gained quite a at least local attention for everything.
Yeah, I bet.
I hope there was at least some customers that read it and felt bad and like called up to be like, oh, I complained about this guy. Obviously it wasn't him. It was this other fucker. Like,
right. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the real shitty thing. That would be what I really want to fuck somebody up for. Like, I see fucking bad prank shit all the time, and it's kind of hard not to in the YouTube age. But like, if you're actually like sabotaging me on a professional level, again, when can I hit him? Like, do not, like, either that or do not put us in the same building anymore. Like, so yeah, good on Bailey for, finally getting the fuck out of that.
But not until like he was fired. That's the thing, is it shows you too. He's probably like 99% of us where, you depend on that paycheck. You don't have a savings, or at least not enough of a savings.
Right, but sometimes getting fired is a lot like what they say about like divorce, where it's like, actually, that's a really good thing to happen for you.
Oh,
that means
totally was. But I'm just saying, if he was putting up with all of this and still going to work, it shows how scary it is just like quitting a job. Yeah,
especially when you've been to for a while, like like.
At
Nobody
least
wants
years.
to head for that unemployment line.
No, it's scary, and then even if you get another job, like, you're starting all over basically. So
right, it's definitely nerve-wracking.
You feel for him, but technically, this makes a second story about somebody that doesn't have to go into work, but work has to keep paying them. So
yeah, and I'm all for that.
Yeah. So that's what I got. Just random stories. I found them interesting.
That was good. That was a fun little grab bag of fucking weird people.
It's not what it's like I said last week, where a lot of times I set out with an idea of what I want to find, like, oh, that's like amazing crime caper from history. But you can't search weird crimes without like a bazillion every local paper does their like, oh, weird police blotter stuff. And to be honest, that was kind of torture, because you go through so many of those lists, and a lot of them are like, oh, this guy got caught, robbing a house naked. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's weird.
That's not that weird.
But it happens a lot, right? Like,
right.
It's weird in the context of a normal person wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's weird because who knows why, but at the same time, that's probably a pretty relatively common thing to happen. It's like every now and then, I think it's kind of a national thing, but I don't know. It might not be as big of a deal where you live, although I would be a little surprised because you're in Ohio, and that seems like a really weird state to me.
We are.
But like we get in Washington, there will just be phases, it seems like, where every year or two, like people will go around and just start trying to like creep people out wearing clown costumes and shit. and like going up to like security cameras dressed as clowns and just being eerie, fucking creepy bastards.
Yeah. I mean, ours are probably more than every couple years, like not more often, but less often than every couple years. But yeah, I mean, I think everywhere gets those. And then what happens too is once it starts happening in one spot, then it's like that urban legend thing of where you hear stories of, oh, did you hear so-and-so saw a clown like in a cornfield? And it's like, well, did they really? I don't know. I got told about it a couple of days ago. Like my mom sent me a text of like a news story about like, hey, these fucking weirdos are back. And like it is creepy, and it's like, you know, clowns are definitely eerie on their own, and when people are trying to be scary with them, it's pretty effective. But there is still even a part of me then like that's not original. Yeah,
like this has happened so many times now that it's
like the other one that we get all the time here is like, oh, man breaks into a home to rob it at night and then is found asleep on the couch. It's like, well, yeah, because they were like on a bunch of shit.
So yeah, you clown people, if you listen to the show, you should have already got your idea.
Yes,
crappy baseball mascots.
Yeah, not just Crazy Crab. That's Ben's. He called dibs, but there's plenty of bad. Well, fuck that new Philadelphia Flyers guy,
gritty.
Yeah, man. That
LA Clippers have one of the worst fucking mascots ever. So hop on that. That's a freebie from me to you. Like if you want to be weird, get some Chuck the Condor in your life.
Tried to Google it, but me being the internet genius I am, I just typed LA Clippers as if the mascot would just automatically be the first thing that would return. Yeah, what the hell is that? I mean, I get it's
Chuck the Condor.
It looks like he's trying to sell me cereal.
He's actually trying to sell you shoes, which is also really gross and creepy. So
anyway,
that's the show this week.
Glad you survived.
Thank you. I'm glad you survived whatever you've been doing. We'll reconvene next week and see if we survived. Until then, don't die. Bye.